Our next speaker, Nicholas Tampio, is an associate professor here at Fordham in political science, and his main focus of research is fascinating. He studies the effects of the Enlightenment on contemporary politics and philosophy. He's written books on Immanuel Kant and Gilles Deleuze. Yeah, I took French in high school. In addition to being published on the Huffington Post and CNN, in addition to countless other peer-reviewed articles. Tonight, he will be talking to us about some of his more current research with his presentation entitled Democracy and the Test Refusal Movement. Everybody, please help me welcome Nicholas Tampio.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Nicholas Tampio, and I'm here to talk about democracy and the test refusal movement. In 2015, 200,000 New York students refused end-of-year Common Core state tests. In 2016, that number actually went up. What we're seeing right now is a concerted effort by the federal government, state governments, and local education authorities to stop the test refusal movement. What I'm here to do today is to tell you why parents are refusing the Common Core tests. And if your parents, or if you're students between the grades of 3 through 8, I'd encourage you to join the test refusal movement. And if you're not parents, or if you're not students in those ages, I'd encourage you to support the test refusal movement. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about how I became involved in this movement. My story began in 2011 when my oldest son started kindergarten. And it just started off great, just really great. The teacher was a Montessori-trained teacher, and we were effectively getting Montessori education in a public school. So one thing she would do is collect acorns from trees in the neighborhood. And then she would get soil and put it in an aquarium in her classroom and put the seeds in, and then watch them start to grow. And then she would take them, and the students would take them into the neighborhood and plant them in various places. Our neighborhood has a lot of these trees. And all the time they're reading, presenting, doing hands-on science experiments. They're seeing things grow. They're learning about the scientific method, right? So they're learning a ton of things without even being aware that they're learning. So the fall of 2011 was great. Another great thing she did was she would teach students about art. And they would read the biographies of artists, or they would try to do art in the style of Norman Rockwell, who actually lives sort of near our neighborhood, or used to live in near our neighborhood, or learn about Picasso. And once again, they're learning to speak, they're learning to write. School is a joyous place. Things changed in January of 2012. My wife came to me and said, Nick, the teacher is now making kids sit on a carpet, and she's lecturing at them. And I'll just move ahead a little bit to the story. What we realized is that we were feeling the effect of one of the kindergarten Common Core standards, which said that kids had to be able to read reader-emergent texts with purpose and understanding. That's one of the Common Core standards. And what that does is that there's this expectation that all kindergartners learn to read by the time that they're done with kindergarten, and there's no research basis for this. What it does is it pressures teachers to use a didactic method in the classroom, and kids learn to hate school, and it's just a mess in the early grade standards. My son now is in 5th grade, and certain of the problems persist. I would say the problems persist because of the first Common Core English Language Arts Anchor Standard. And what the first ELA Anchor Standard does is say you have to be able to provide evidence from a text to answer questions about the text. There are times when you need to be able to provide evidence from a text to answer a question. I acknowledge that. But when that's the exclusive focus on education, you're telling kids you're not allowed to add your own thoughts. You're not allowed to bring in things from outside the text. You're not allowed to sort of do creative, interesting work with the text. It's just regurgitating the text. And when I was preparing, I was talking to a couple students from Long Island, and they were saying that they had similar feelings about the math the math Common Core standards, which it's not really teaching you math, it's teaching you Common Core math. You have to be able to do the steps as required by the Common Core, which really confines mathematical thinking. So pedagogically, the Common Core standards are part of the problem, not the implementation. The standards themselves are part of the problem. Another problem with the standards is how they came about. If you read one article about the Common Core, I would recommend this 2014 article by Lindsay Layden. It was on the front page of the Washington Post. It confirmed what a lot of us had been suspecting and sort of had read on blogs. What the article was called was How Bill Gates Pulled Off the Swift Common Core Revolution. And what it did is it basically just identified the DC insiders who wrote the standards, coordinated the standards, embedded it in Race to the Top, and so to get incentivized states to adopt the standards. And so really what it was supposed to be done in such a way that by the time parents figured out what was happening, it was too late. The standards had already been locked into too many parts of the education system. And that's not how things work in a democracy. Right? Democracy, if it means anything, it means consulting the people who are affected by policies. And we weren't consulted when the Common Core was adopted or implemented. And in a democracy, the people should be able to tell you when the shoe doesn't fit. So we're not necessarily saying that we're experts on standards. There's a role for experts. But what we're doing with the test refusal movement is saying, these standards are not working for us. This testing regime is not working for us. Policymakers need to change it. There is actually a study that came out from Columbia University, the two professors, Oren Pismoni-Levy and Nancy Green-Sarejski, and it was actually collecting evidence from a survey about parents who were refusing the test and trying to figure out what are the actual reasons that parents are refusing. And here's some of the data that they found out. Who opts out? It's Democrats, Republicans, independents. That one of the initial arguments of the Obama administration was this resistance is coming from this right-wing fringe. And one of the great things about this report is, no, it's actually a really diverse movement. And from the survey that they did, it's mostly Democrats. About 59% of the respondents were Democrats. Another thing that they discovered was that a lot of the opt-out movement is very educated. So it's not based out of ignorance, right? A lot of us are doing our homework. And a lot of educators, right? A lot of people who are seeing in the classroom what the Common Core is doing, they're part of the opt-out movement. The movement is suburban, urban, rural. And actually one of the pleasures of being part of this movement is that it's just a really diverse group of people coming together primarily because they love kids. They're concerned about their kids. They're concerned about other kids. They say, listen, we got to stop this. This is on us. My kids, I got to defend them. I got to defend your kids, right? So the top reasons for opting out, these are the 6 main reasons. Common Core, instructional time dedicated to the Common Core, teaching to the test, teacher evaluations. Now, these first 4 for me are all part of a unit, and maybe I'll focus on teacher evaluations. What's the big deal with high-stakes testing? What high-stakes testing does is it says that if a teacher's students don't get a high enough growth rate on the test scores, that the teacher could lose their job. And if the school doesn't see high enough test score growth rate, that the school can be taken over by the state and turned over to a charter school. So what the high-stakes test does is it pressures teachers to teach to the test. So the first 4 reasons that parents are refusing is because they're saying, listen, we're seeing this. Think about all the wonderful things you can study in life, and all of a sudden you're just studying these 2 subjects that are being tested on the test. It's not acceptable. Not acceptable for my kids, your kids, other people's kids. It's just not acceptable. 2 other reasons are given are corporations and schools. Just this company called Pearson. They helped write the standards. They write curriculum. They make the tests. I mean, that's not how things work in a democracy where this private corporation gets all this control over the educational process. Privatization of schools is that the Common Core standards, yes, they're different than these other things, but they're all connected, right? That they're often used, low Common Core test scores are used to justify the state turning public schools over to charter schools. Here's one reason that's not a reason, that 4.9% concerned about test performance. Parents aren't refusing because their kids are getting low scores, right? That's just slander. That's just people who are defending the test, just throwing mud at parents. We know our kids need to learn more, right? That's why we send them to school. Here are a couple quotes from this report that I think really give you can hear the voice of the people writing these, or at least I can. I am a teacher. I see the horrible truth associated with testing. These tests are totally unfair to children with learning differences. There's absolutely no proof that any of these tests have any validity whatsoever. What does opt-out want? Well, we're a very diverse group of people. What we all want is a stop to what's happening, right? That's why we're refusing the test. This is, as nobody consulted us when Common Core came into being. Nobody consulted us about these tests. We're saying no. We're saying no to Common Core. We're saying no to high-stakes testing that pressures teachers to teach the Common Core. No excessive data collection that it's a little bit complicated, but what the tests do is allow a middle layer to acquire information about students that then give it on to the federal government. So there's a law against the federal government making a national student database, but these tests make possible a de facto database, so basically a permanent record for kids, right? And there's civil liberties problems with that. In charter schools, and that's its own debate, but certainly the way that they're being that Common Core is being used to turn certain schools over to charter schools is a problem. What are we for? Right, so I told you what we're against. What are we for? I think a great quote to give you a clue what we want is, what the best and wisest parent wants for his child, that must we want for all the children of the community. So there's a very famous education scholar named Diane Ravitch, and she says there's actually not a serious disagreement about what makes a good school. Does it have small class sizes or large class sizes? Right? Does it have hands-on science experiments or no hands-on science experiments? Does it have field trips? Does it not have field trips? Does it have a trained teacher? Does it not have a trained teacher, right? Are kids fed enough? Are they not fed enough? The fact is, we have to generate a will to provide for all kids what's just a matter of course at good private schools. That's what we're fighting for. So where do things stand now with testing? Things kind of changed pretty rapidly, actually. Congress in 2015, December, they passed this law called the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. And what the law says is that states must continue to assess the achievement of not less than 95% of all students. And as we speak, there's a battle going on right now. Does that mean that you have to test, or that 95% of students have to take the test? And so there's the law, and then there are the rules that the agencies come up with to interpret the law. And so Secretary of Education right now, John King, he seems to be interpreting the law in such a way that if less than 95% of the students take the tests, or eligible students take the tests, there are going to be federal penalties. And the major federal penalty is a withholding of Title I funds. Title I is the major program, or ESEA, Title I is the major program by which the federal government funds schools with large communities of poor children. And so if Hillary Rodham Clinton had become president, I think she would have continued the Obama administration's policies. The accountability provisions were going to begin in 2017 and 2018. So I thought in a year and a half, it was going to get really ugly, the test refusal battle. With Donald Trump, I've spent the day reading, trying to figure out where does he stand on, him and his team, where do they stand on standards, where do they stand on accountability, how much are they going to change the rules for interpreting ESSA? It's an open question. If my kids are supposed to take the Common Core tests, we're going to refuse. That's where I stand. That's where a lot of us stand. So if you are parents, or if you are students in grades 3 through 8, and I've convinced you, I can encourage you to go to the New York State Allies for Public Education website, and they have sample letters that you can download, fill in, give to your principal, give to your superintendent. And if you are not in one of those categories, I ask that you stand up, defend the test refusal movement. My kids and I thank you.